and I'm going to be presenting my paper in Satan's Mire, Bruce Dickinson's chemical wedding to William Blake. The release of Iron Maiden's The Number of the Beast in 1986 caused a cultural turmoil in the United States, accusing the band of Satanism and engendering moral panic in the process. Religious groups organized public burnings of the album in hope of keeping American youth safe from satanic contamination. Reinforcing his interests with satanic fires and forces of defiance, it is quite suitable that Iron Maiden singer Bruce Dickinson later released his solo album, The Chemical Wedding, in 1999, in which he addresses several of Blake's works. Dickinson draws upon and incorporates his album within the heavy metal music style. And some authors, as to say Robert Walter in his study from 1993, for him, heavy metal is a music style infused with notions such as virtuosity and confrontation. And virtuosity relates mostly to the compositional form of the songs and their execution, and confrontations refer to the lyrics and the pro-revolutionary ideology commonly presented by some bands, at least during the period Walter was publishing his study. The combination of these characteristics produces a notion of defiance, energy, and power. And this discussion about heavy metal serves as a sort of framework for my presentation. Dickinson's The Chemical Wedding presents some of Blake's paintings and engravings. The album cover displays the ghost of the flea, as well as the back cover. We have Blake's illustrations for the Book of Job, Satan is mighty in Job of Boils. Also, we have Nabucodonosor. The use of these images, however, sometimes feels a bit idiosyncratic. Even though we will be productive to discuss them, I'm going to focus on the lyrics, which provide a more tangible connection to Blake's poetry. Concerning Dickinson's The Chemical Wedding, his tracks are not merely inspired by Blake. They are reinterpretations, translations, rereadings of Blake's works, sometimes even responding to certain themes or issues in the illuminated books. Dickinson weaves themes, references, and quotes into his own reading, forming a complex web of meaning. At first glance, it might appear that his songs are a group of scrambled references to Blake. However, the songs actually have a sequence, which is the same order as they appear in the album. For instance, track number 1, King in Crimson, resonates with America Prophecy, more specifically with the violent Fury Revolution arc brings about. This sets up a problem familiar to Blake's readers, that the revolution so desperately needed comes with individual suffering. Track number 2, The Chemical Wedding, concludes with an image of lying in the grave as a way of knowing, of entering the material world, similar to what we might read in Blake's Book of Tell, at least in my reading, in the reading I'm presenting today. Track 6, Gates of Urizen, and 7, Jerusalem, and 8, Trumpets of Jericho, raise the question of whether it is possible to build the Promised Land, attesting somewhat pessimistically that it is not. Ultimately, though, Dickinson seems to agree with Blake. Blake's later works, that Jerusalem, or the sacred land, or the paradise within human breast, or that it might be a spiritual state of mind brought forth by vision. In general, the main narrative of the album concerns the necessity of transformation and revolution, along with the implications of violence, ultimately offering a vision of imaginative freedom that seeks to take us beyond violence. It wouldn't be possible to analyze all the songs here, so in my presentation, I'll be focusing particularly on the King in Crimson and Book of Tell. It is worth noting that even with the association to other works by Blake, it seems that the main source of Dickinson's album is the first Book of Urizen, especially the passages concerning lost forging, or giving form to Urizen's body and the separation of loss into two halves, masculine and feminine, as presented in the book. So the King in Crimson is a very heavy song, and thinking back now, I should have prepared a PowerPoint to share the sound with you, and I apologize for that. But I'm sure that is not a very difficult record to find, and for those who might not know it, I will very much I very much hope that you can maybe listen after this presentation. So the King in Crimson opens the album. It sings the coming of a king in red, who in some respects resembles Orc, especially the Orc from America Prophecy. He is a sort of messianic figure who engulfs all the regions with his fires, as Orc does when he reaches the American shore in the Continental Prophecies. He also arrives during a spiritual night, a moment of obscurity, oppression, and confusion. He also, and in the lyrics, Dickinson evokes Blake's stone of night, an analogy to religion's institutions that Blake sometimes does, that weighed upon the narrator. So in the song, we are told that and I quote, "Twisted sons and daughters, riding lonely in Satan's mire, if you only could see the visions." It seems here that Dickinson conceives Orc and Urizen as opposites, as Northrop Frye did. Moreover, they are characters that will eventually become interchangeable. Orc, which begins as a spirit of revolution, will rise against Urizen, the embodiment or representation of reason, of sometimes oppression. He will become king, and then he will become himself a tyrant. The implication of the narrator of a sort of promise of liberation is a visionary one, implied in the possibility of vision. Dickinson evokes the image of Satan's mire as an unfruitful basis for human action. People try in vain to build upon Satan's mire, which causes the narrator to despise the world. This is interesting because the Messiah of the lyrics sort of and the chorals is associated with a famous verse from Paradise Lost, which is quoting is "Arise, awake, awake, or be forever fallen," which Satan delivers to his fallen legions. To Blake, Milton's Satan was a symbol of rebellion, of revolution, one from which he drew on many occasions, as in the most commented assertion that Milton was from the devil's party without knowing it, from the marriage of heaven and hell. However, these satanic messianic images are mixed with the god of this world, Urizen, who is sometimes referred as a false god or Satan, as we see in Blake's For the Sexes, The Gates of Paradise, which he addressed to the accuser, who is the god of this world. In Dickinson's lyrics, Milton's Satan's call to rise is inverted into an announcement of the institution of the institution of the king is about to be restored. And it's arise, awake, the king in crimson comes. This superposition of images of Satan and God runs through the majority of the lyrics of the album. The other song I would like to comment on is Book of Tell. It's the song Book of Tell overlaps with the Blake's Book of Tell and the first book of Urizen, and Visions of Apocalypse. In Blake's The Book of Tell, Tell lives in the valleys of Har, a kind of Edenic paradise that is lush and pure, and consumed by existential doubts, mainly regarding desire and death. She engages in a dialogue with a series of characters until she enters the bowels of the earth, which may represent her entering the material world. There she is confronted by a tomb. Tell then realizes the presence of death and flees back to the valleys of Har, unable to fall or to fulfill the physical and sensual desire that tormented her. Dickinson's song does not tell the same story we read in the Blake's Illuminated Book. Instead, Dickinson lyrics engages directly with the listener, mentioning Stell's story, the existence of her book, and instigating the same doubts that consume Tell into the listener's imagination. The song comes after Killing Floor, which again associates Satan with God, who washed the stain of freedom from humankind. However, the Book of Tell begins with the verses that the mark is on you now, the furnace sealed inside your head, which may suggest that the mark of freedom that God has washed from mankind is now associated with the human imagination and vision, as sealed in the furnace inside your head. But this liberty comes from the body in what seems to be an apocalyptic vision or event instigated by a priestess. The priestess is described as, and I quote, the whore that never told her tale in Dickinson's song. And Blake often inverts meanings of chastity, associating them with prostitutes, much inspired by his subversive readings of Apocrypha or pseudo-epigraphs, such as the Gospel of Thomas and his readings of Christ. Dickinson associates the priestess with Christ, and then the priestess with the serpent. And here I quote, the snake and the priestess, they are one. The veil of flesh is ripped undone. Here, Dickinson seems to be drawing from Gnostic notions, particularly the Ophites, who associate the serpent in Genesis with Christ, not with Satan. In Ophite tradition, the God of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, is a false god called the Demiurge. Therefore, Christ caused the fall of humankind to free humankind from the oppression of a tyrannical god. In Dickinson's lyrics, as I mentioned, this liberation is set in motion by the priestess. She opens the Book of Tell, a material object in Dickinson's verses, which prompts the apocalyptic vision that offers liberation. And these 2 last verses from Blake's Book of Tell, which are, why a tender curb on a youthful burning boy, why a little curtain of flesh on a bed of our desire. Such verses suggest a questioning of physical, sensual, even sexual freedom. And this image parallels associations of death in the Book of Tell and also in the first book of Urizen. Because when Los and the other Eternals, these entities, deities, or material, typical representations Blake created, when they find Urizen's disorganized, fragmented body, they assume he's dead. Tormented by the ever-flowing state of eternity, Urizen wanted to be material, so he condensed himself into material forms. In this sense, having a material body is equivalent of being dead because the body is stationary. However, in other works, such as The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, Blake proposes the notion of sensual enjoyment, which refers to the sensual exploration of the body. And by exploring the body, humankind will be able to find an immanent paradise, or at least to experience the divine through the delightful exploration of the body. In Blake's The Book of Tell, Tell flees back to the valleys of Har, unable to abdicate her state of innocence, unable to fall or to experience sensual enjoyment. However, in Dickinson's lyrics, when the priestess forcefully opens the Book of Tell, the veil of flesh is ripped undone, and then, and I quote, the womb of death spits out its rotten core. Here, death implies, in a way, the liberation of desire through the experience of the body. However, since Dickinson's Book of Tell is also a material, stationary object, and it implies violence and violation. In Dickinson's lyrics, God and Satan are superposed in the image of Urizen, an ever-present figure throughout the album. And the presence of Urizen has already contaminated the experience of the body, perhaps by the stone or night implicated in the first song. The song following Book of Tell is Gates of Urizen, pronounced Urizen by Dickinson, as if opening the Book of Tell, in this case, which is contaminated by stone of night, might lead to the gates of Urizen. And as we see, Dickinson critically recreates Blake's work, translating it into his energetic style of heavy metal. Translation undertaking is infused with a sense of confrontation and serves as a critical response, really. Dickinson engaged in a complex process of debating, superposing, approximating his songs with Blake's works. And Dickinson responds to Blake's poems, altering their meaning sometimes in a very alchemical way, transforming while being transformed in the process. And to paraphrase him, laying in the same grave in their chemical wedding. And I think I'm almost reaching the time, I guess, and that will be all. Thank you.